Atlanta Press Club Debates 2008, the race for the 4th District of the Public Service Commission, is brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Here is the moderator for tonight's debate.
Good evening, I'm John Pruitt, anchor for WSB Television. Welcome to our 2008 election campaign debates originating here from the studios of GPB. Tonight's debate is organized by the Atlanta Press Club. We also welcome our online audience at gpb.org. And now let's meet the candidates facing each other in the election for Georgia's Public Service Commission 4th District. And they are in alphabetical order: Brandon Givens, a special education teacher and a former small business owner. Lauren McDonald is a former commissioner and state representative, also a businessman. And Jim Powell, who currently works as an independent energy consultant and retired from the Department of Energy. Now, these are the candidates. Here is the format for tonight's debate. In the first round, each candidate will answer one question. 1 minute will be allotted for the answer, follow up by the panelists at my discretion. And as moderator, I will decide if a 30-second rebuttal should be allowed by the candidates. In the second round, the candidates will question one another. In the third round, our panelists will continue the questioning, and at the end of the question and answer period, each candidate will make a 30-second closing statement. So now let's meet our panel of prominent Georgia journalists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. And they are John Sepulvado, Rome Bureau Chief for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Next is Powell, a reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And our third panelist is Robin McDonald, a reporter with the Fulton County Daily Report. No relation, by the way, to Lauren McDonald. And now let's start the debate. In this round, the order of candidates to be questioned has been randomly selected, so we'll begin with John Sepulveda's question for Lauren McDonald.
Mr. McDonald, according to your most recent campaign filings, $30,000 has come from the industry, or attorneys from the industry, or lobbyists from the industry that you will be regulating. That was your last report. The report before that, over $52,000, most of it, again, the vast majority, coming from people that will be impacted by the industry you're regulating. At the same time, Mr. Givens hasn't, as far as I know, filed a campaign report. Mr. Powell hasn't had any of the same campaign contributors. So my question is, why do you suppose executives and employees at SCANA, Alltel, Georgia Power, and other utility interests are so enthusiastically supporting your candidacy?
Well, let me start by saying that they are within the confines of the law. These are individuals that work for different companies that are private citizens, just like the rest of us are. They have made contributions to my candidacy. They want fair, equal opportunity to address their issues, just like a consumer that calls me off the street gets to address the issues. I have reported them accurately. I have reported them just like I signed up to run for this office legally. I signed up and did my financial disclosure legally, timely, and so I make no excuse. Commissioners that are sitting now, even Commissioner Spear, that says she doesn't take those, took monies from the Georgia textile manufacturers, took money from John Deere. It's all a matter of record.
Next question now from Powell for Brandon Givens.
Mr. Givens, to what degree do you agree with the Libertarian Party's opposition to regulation, since you're running for a regulatory seat?
Right. Well, I'm a free market advocate. Now, a lot of times people are confused about what deregulation means. Perfect example, Atlanta Gas and Light. Having one wholesaler and then a group of retailers is not real deregulation. I'm in favor of deregulation, but not how it's been presented in the past.
And the next question from Robin McDonald for Jim Powell.
Mr. Powell, so the public will know, what is the current status of your fight with the Secretary of State about your residency with regard to the Public Service Commission district? And why did you file a homestead exemption in Cobb County if you live in Towns County 60% of the time and are declaring that as your residence?
Thank you for that question. The current status is there was a hearing yesterday in the Georgia Supreme Court. And we don't know when the Georgia Supreme Court will make a decision regarding that case. I'm optimistic that it will be decided in my favor. Two reasonable justices have already ruled that I am a qualified candidate for District 4, and I fully expect the Georgia Supreme Court to affirm that.
Can you explain why you filed your homestead exemption in Cobb County?
I actually have a homestead exemption in Towns County now. And everything that I have regarding my residency it resides in Towns County. My vehicle registration, my driver's license, my boat registration, my voter registration, and my voting record. At the time I filed for office, my homestead exemption was not in Towns County. It is now in Towns County. It was one of those things that I attempted to move it. The deadline in Cobb County to file for homestead exemption is in April. The deadline in Towns County is in March. I missed the deadline filing for Towns County.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This concludes the first round of questions. Now, in the second round, the candidates will have the chance to ask each of their opponents a question. Please limit these questions to 15 seconds. 1 minute will be allowed for answers, and the questioner then will have 30 seconds for rebuttal. Now, the order of questions has been determined by random drawing. Candidates, please indicate to whom the question should be addressed, and the first question will be asked by Jim Powell.
My question is for Brandon Givens. Mr. Givens, you are probably aware that in most states, ex parte type communications is illegal. Do you agree with me that it is time to end the secretive backroom dealings that the Georgia Public Service Commission unfortunately continues?
Oh, absolutely.
Any rebuttal?
Looks like we're in agreement.
All right, very good. Let's move on then. Brandon Givens now has the chance to ask a question of one of his opponents. Mr. Givens.
I'll ask Mr. Powell. All right. In your debate with Pam Davidson in the primary, you mentioned in support of a preemptive rate increase to pay for 2 new nuclear reactors, that renewables were fine but unreliable as evidenced by the California blackouts. The Northeast blackouts knocked out 22 nuclear facilities, and the California blackouts were caused by sweetheart deregulation and not building new energy production facilities for nearly a decade. In truth, renewables are largely responsible for getting California out of the mess.
Let's have your question, please.
My question is, were you intentionally misleading the people to make a rate increase sound like a good idea, or did you simply not know what you were talking about?
Powell.
I think we need to correct this because
Mrs. McDonald.
I did not debate Pam Davidson.
Very sorry.
That was for Mr. McDonald.
Mr. McDonald, I misunderstood you. I thought she said Mr. Powell. Mr.
You did say
McDonald.
Mr. Powell.
That's what I thought. But your question is to Mr.
to-
McDonald. Well, let's have your answer then.
I didn't listen to the question because it wasn't addressed to me.
Okay. When you said that renewables were the cause of the blackouts in California and that nuclear is such a great idea, despite the fact that that had nothing to do with the blackouts in California, were you trying to mislead people on purpose to make the rate increase for nuclear power sound like a good idea, or did you just not know what you were talking about?
Well, number one, I do know what I'm talking about. And the second thing is, as far as the blackouts were concerned, it was because of the deregulation of the electric industry and the transmission difficulties that they had with the power grids in California. Californians wouldn't let them build grids, and the population growth was there. I am for nuclear programs. I think it's the way to go with clean, cheap energy, and I make no apology for it.
Rebuttal, Mr. Givens.
The blackouts in the Northeast knocked out 22 nuclear facilities. Why are you so interested right now in nuclear? Does it have to do with Vogel?
Well, you can't have another question, so is that your rebuttal? Let's move on. Yeah. It's time for Lauren McDonald to ask the next question. This is the last question in this round of the candidate of your choice.
Mr. Powell, I'm going back to Ms. McDonald's question about your qualifications as far as a resident. You said you missed time on not qualifying for homestead exemption. You knew when the law was that you had to be a resident of the 4th District. I still don't think you've answered the question.
Well, the question is somewhat moot because 2 judges have already ruled that of the 15 criteria that's required in the state of Georgia to establish residency, the homestead exemption in itself is not relevant. In fact, the intent of the candidate to reside in a particular jurisdiction is the basis of Georgia law. So the homestead exemption, in fact, is not relevant. I'm curious as to why this vendetta has been put against me over the past 5 months to determine whether or not I'm a qualified candidate. I've proven that, and the homestead exemption in itself is really a single issue that really, when you look at the overall things, is not relevant.
Rebuttal, Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Powell, as I told you earlier in other venues, I really have no problem with that. The only thing I'm saying, the law is the law. And as you deal with issues before the Public Service Commission, you're dealing with issues that are constitutional and are issues that are made by the Georgia General Assembly, and you have to follow the law. So it's very important that you understand the law and that you follow law in decisions that you make on the Public Service Commission.
Now we understand that, Mr. McDonald, you have a chance to ask a question of Mr. Givens.
I have no question.
All right, Mr. Givens, do you have a question for one of your opponents? Mr. Powell, actually.
Okay, Mr. Powell, as I mentioned before, the deregulation, so-called, of Atlanta Gas and Light was more or less a sweetheart deal. Do you believe the legislature should revisit this issue?
Absolutely. That's probably been one of the biggest messes that has occurred in the industry in Georgia. It's difficult to put that genie back in the bottle after we have so many marketers out there, and Atlanta Gas Light is out of the retail business. But I think if you talk to many of our honorable members of the General Assembly, they will tell you that it was a huge mistake, and it's something that has made a lot of problems throughout the industry as with the everyday consumers. Yes, by all means, I think the General Assembly should take a hard look at that with the idea of changing things where they work more smoothly for the benefit of the consumer.
Rebuttal, Mr. Givens.
Oh, none.
All right. Mr. Powell, you have a chance now to question Lauren McDonald.
Thank you. Bubba, our country is experiencing an unprecedented economic crisis because the people we entrusted to run our businesses and our government have failed to adhere to the minimal ethical standards. Back in 2001, when you were on the PSC before you were voted off, you presented and pushed through a proposal that cost Georgia ratepayers $885 million over a 3-year period. It's well documented and a matter of public record that this proposal that you presented as your own was in fact secretly written by a Georgia Power attorney. How do your behind-the-scenes deal with Georgia Power and their attorneys differ from what we have seen recently in Washington and on Wall Street?
Mr. Powell, you couldn't be more wrong. Number one, in 1992, residential rates were for utilities were 7.51 cents per kilowatt. At the end of my term in 2002, rates were 7.21 cents. That's a rate reduction. Commercial was 7.33, 6.11 in 2002. Industrial 4.80 in 92, 3.97 in 2002. There was a rate reduction. There was $1.2 billion rate reduction over a 3-year period of time for the citizens of Georgia while I was on the Georgia Public Service Commission. And the company presents the rate case. It is a document. And then you work off of that. And my amendment was, like many other commissioners have an opportunity to make an amendment, voted on by the commission in open session. It's documented.
And your rebuttal, Ms. Powell.
Well, obviously we're going to disagree on this because from what I have seen, the documents I have seen, that is absolutely not true. It is clear that he presented an agreement that was written by a Georgia Power attorney.
You don't know that.
May I finish?
Yes, please.
It is clear that he presented a document as a settlement agreement that was written by a Georgia Power attorney. That's for the record. We have documentation to that effect. And it is clear that that agreement increased the rates of Georgia citizens by $885 million over a 3-year period.
All right, we're going to move now to the next round. This concludes the second round of questioning. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists. From this point until the closing statements, the panelists will be questioning the candidates of his or her choice. We have 1 minute to respond again. Follow-up is allowed. As moderator, I'll determine if opposing candidates will be given 30 seconds for rebuttal. We begin the second round with a question from Pruitt Paul.
This is for Mr. McDonald. Georgia Power is moving ahead with plans to build 2 new nuclear reactors in Georgia. The last time reactors were built here, it was originally estimated to cost $900,000, but it ended up being $9 billion. What would you do to hold down the cost?
It's a whole different scenario here than it was in the mid-'70s. Georgia Power entered in that agreement in the '70s on its own. Today, the nuclear reactors that are on the drawing board are with Georgia Power, Oglethorpe, MEAG, and Dalton Power. So there are many partners in this particular one. Second, in the mid-'70s, nuclear reactors were, everything was custom built. Today we have what we call boilerplate type construction. GE, Westinghouse, Mitsubishi all have nuclear reactors that are not custom made, but blueprint boilerplate type. This is what we'll be looking at, and that's why it'll be a difference in the cost in 02 and 10 and through the construction process, because it'd be 10, 15 before a generation would come off those units.
Next question from Robin McDonald to the candidate of her choice.
Mr. McDonald, not to gang up on you, but I do have a question for you. The voters threw you out of office 6 years ago in favor of Angela Speer, who beat you on a shoestring campaign. What have you done in the past 6 years other than change your political party from Democrat to Republican to persuade voters to give you another chance?
Well, I offer because Georgia has been so good to me in the private sector of business and in my paralleling private sector with public service. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm at a time in life when I have grandchildren, and I want to give back to those grandchildren what the state has given to me. If you want to see their pictures, I have them. What I have done and the difference with Mrs. Speer, you know, I've never met the lady personally. And I just want to serve. I'm very pro-nuclear. I want to be a part of this program, and that's why I'm doing it.
But that hasn't really changed in the past 6 years. Is there anything to add that you have done in the past 6 years to persuade voters that they should give you a second chance?
Well, I persuade voters by presenting my experience. I persuade voters by giving myself an opportunity to serve them, the people of Georgia. That's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from experience as a business person. I'm coming with experience as a legislator. I'm coming with the experience of being on the Public Service Commission.
Let's move to the next question from John Sepulvado.
Not to stick on these character issues, but Mr. McDonald, you just pulled out your kids, very cute kids, I should say. I got the glimpse of them. The last debate, though, against Ms. Davidson, you also pulled out something of your jacket pocket. You pulled out a letter that was that you claimed was a letter that I haven't seen or anybody else has seen, that claimed that Ms. Davidson was raising campaign funds from the industry. And it was basically, you used it to shoot back and say, look, you can't accuse me of doing it, you're doing it too. Where did you get that letter? Where did that letter come from?
I got it from a person that she sent the letter to,
an
individual.
Who is that person?
I don't have to do that. I even talked to Ms. Davidson about that, and she said, well, she didn't know anything about it. A staff person sent it out.
But my question then is...
It was sent out. It was factual.
On one point, you're saying that you're not going to be the insider's insider, which your opponents accuse you of. That's what they accuse you of. But on the second hand, you're pulling out a letter that you won't say where you got it from, that was damaging to your campaign, or to her campaign, that perhaps could have only been gotten from either the PSC, a lobbyist, somebody who is an insider. So my question again, who did you get that letter from, and why won't you state who they are?
Because I don't have to say who it was. It was a person that was a supporter of mine that got a letter of her that was one of those contributors of mine that she sent these letters to. Not just that one, to different marketers, different individuals. They were sent. Just like Mrs. Speer got contributions from the Georgia textile manufacturers and from John Deere and others. It's a matter of record, sir.
Let's move on, and let me remind the panelists we have two other candidates, so please direct your questions to someone.
Enjoying it.
Well, I'm sure you are, but Paul, do you have a question for one of the other candidates?
Yes, I have one for Mr. Powell. What changes, if any, to the Green Power program would you enact?
Oh, I'd certainly expand it. I think the Green Power program is very limited. It becomes principally, you mean the Georgia Power Green Power program is the one I suspect that you're speaking to. There are other Green Power programs in the state, but the one in particular, Georgia Power, I think the premium associated with that Green Power is way too high. I think we need to look at other sources of green power energy beyond landfill gas. I think we need to look at principally at biofuels, biomass. Georgia is third in the nation in an abundance of biofuels, biomass energy. I think we need to look at other renewable resources as well. That, along with other energy best practices that we need to incorporate into our energy policy that we should be developing in the long term. But green power is coming. Georgia is way behind the curve from other states, even TVA for that matter. It's time to take a hard look at that and revamp the whole green power program.
Thank you. Robin McDonald, your question, please.
Yes, Mr. Powell, this is for you. Citizen groups have, over the past several years, begun fighting the power companies in Georgia over the use of eminent domain for the construction of power lines and power substations. Should the Public Service Commission exercise oversight over the utilities' use of eminent domain and provide those citizens with a place to appeal? Why or why not?
I think that's the eminent domain is a topic that hasn't been handled very well by the General Assembly. I think that's something that we need to take a look at. Whether the Public Service Commission should exercise more oversight of it is really up to the General Assembly. But it's a sensitive matter. We have to be very, very aware and concerned about how eminent domain issues are processed in the state. I don't think we can just randomly go out and condemn private property. I think there needs to be a negotiation.
Follow-up question. You said it's up to the General Assembly, but we already have lower courts here on record as saying that the PSC does have that authority. The PSC is using taxpayer money to appeal that hand in hand with Georgia Power. Is that a good decision?
No, it's not. They should not be using taxpayer money. When there's issues, I think the utility should be paying for the appeals.
Next question now from John Sepulvado.
Mr. Gibbons, you're 30 years old. You've worked as a school teacher. You're working as a school teacher, and you are a former business owner. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot out about you, who you are, your biography. What was your business, and why is it a former business? What happened for you to leave the business?
I just had a small weekly paper, and I sold it. Now, I think what you're getting at is why I'm qualified. Well, one, the PSC is not an application-based job. I mean, the best candidate is the one who's going to serve the interest of the commission, and the constituents, rather. Two, the PSC is not simply about electricity, gas, utilities. There's also things such as moving companies, telecommunications. Mr. Powell's very knowledgeable in energy. McDonald's was a transportation lobbyist. So we all know a little bit about different things. I've researched the free market and free market solutions and everything from public transportation and natural gas. This knowledge makes me well qualified to represent the interest of the constituents.
Paul, next question, please.
This is for Mr. Givens as well. Both presidential candidates want to spend a lot of money on clean coal technology research, but the results on that has been mixed as right now. Would you support new investments by utilities in clean coal research here? If so, why? If not, why not?
Well, my plan is to open the market up. Right now you've got Green Power EMC, which does use renewables and such, but they're not allowed to enter the market directly. See, we keep hearing about how, well, it's not efficient, the renewables and such, but they can't compete directly. Now, when it's on the same grid, it seems to me reasonable that we can work out a way in which the renewables, clean coal, etc., can go in directly. Right now, if I want to use green energy, I've got to pay a little bit extra to Georgia Power. Why can't Green Power EMC or another group directly bill me, and then they can use that money to invest in those sorts of technologies? I would like to vote with my dollars, not have bureaucrats decide how we invest our money.
So you wouldn't support investments?
I would have to look at each particular issue. I can't say I would or I wouldn't. I just prefer free market solutions. And it really would depend on the bill. I would have to read it before I would know definitely whether or not I would or wouldn't support it.
Robin McDonald.
Mr. McDonald, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Powell about citizens groups and eminent domain. Is Georgia Power right in the current litigation in asserting that no one, including the PSC, has oversights over its decisions about where to locate power stations? And should citizens have a right, as the lower courts have said, to appeal Georgia Power eminent domain decisions to the Public Service Commission?
I think the Public Service Commission certainly can play a role in some of that decision-making process. The law needs to be changed by the General Assembly of Georgia if that's the direction it needs to go. But you've got to understand this. These transmission lines have to take energy to where the people are. Your substations have to be located where the people are.
Right, but that doesn't have anything to do with the role of the Public Service Commission, sir.
Well, it really does, because the Public Service Commission can indirectly intervene in helping make those types of decisions. But I think in essence, it's got to go back to the General Assembly of Georgia, and that's where the law states that they have that power and right of eminent domain. The courts interpret one thing, but the laws are the laws, you know.
Well, the Public Service Commission right now is arguing together with Georgia Power that it should not have that authority. Is that a correct position?
Well, I'm really not familiar with that position and that argument that's taking place right now.
Okay.
I'm really just not familiar with that particular issue itself.
Next question now from John Sepulvado.
Mr. Powell, regardless of whatever the outcome is regarding your residency, and I know you have said this is political, is there an argument, though, to be made that if you, as you admitted earlier in this debate, or you acknowledged that you missed a detail of knowing when the homestead cutoff was, is there an argument to be made that if you can miss that kind of detail, then you might miss important details on the PSC that can affect the ratepayers and utility users of the state?
I don't think so. No, because primarily, well, first of all, my background is in accounting, and I pay a lot of attention to detail. When I moved when I retired from the U.S. Department of Energy in February of 2007, I relocated from Cobb County to Towns County. As you know, when you relocate, there are a lot of things that happen. The transactions don't occur just like that. It happens over time. And when you look at the expiration dates of the filing deadlines for each one of the counties, they differ throughout the state. So I think it's a simple mistake that anyone can make, and that issue alone should not be held up by the Secretary of State as a single issue that says I am not a qualified candidate.
With respect and fairness, a lot of people who move, though, they remember to homestead their properties. So
well,
why did you miss it, I guess? What was the explanation? Why did you miss the deadline for homesteading your property?
When I relocated to Towns County, I had no intention of running for office. So between the time I relocated to Towns County until the time I filed, I missed the deadline. It's a matter, I know you're making a point that attention to detail, but it was one simple mistake that would not impact my decisions as a PSC commissioner.
Next question from Paul.
This is from Mr. McDonald. Georgia Power wants to get reimbursed for its spending on nuclear plant construction before they're operational, but that goes against long-standing state policy. Do you support changing that policy? If so, why?
No, sir.
If not, why not?
Because I just think that it needs to be looked at in great depth before you authorize a construction work in progress. Who's going to be there? Who's going to be on the commission? You know, things can change over time. I think that you've got to, again, look at all the partners that are involved in this thing. It's not just Georgia Power. It's Oglethorpe, it's MEAG, and it's Dalton Powell. So there's got to be some serious discussions in what the cost is going to be, how it's going to be paid for, and when it's going to be paid for.
Robin McDonald.
I want to ask the same question of Mr. Powell, but I just want to clarify. So you're saying that the cost of the nuclear plant should not be passed on to the ratepayers prior to the time the nuclear plants go online?
It should not be automatically passed on to the ratepayers.
Okay.
There is
you're offering a qualified answer. Same question to you, Mr. Powell. Should the power companies be allowed to pass on the cost of constructing and expanding nuclear power plants prior to their ratepayers prior to those plants going online?
Absolutely not. I'm very much against that. I think the utilities that are involved in the expansion of Plant Vogtle need to be very creative in how they're going to finance the expansion of that plant. In today's capital market, it's going to be very, very difficult. All fuel sources should be on the table as far as Georgia is concerned. Nuclear is very important. Natural gas is important. Coal is important. Renewables are very important. I don't think we should put our eggs in that nuclear basket and look totally at nuclear, expanding nuclear. I think we need to seriously consider all resources. The truth of it is, it's going to be a long time before we build nuclear. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is actually questioning the new modular design that's being proposed for Plant Vogtle. The long regulatory approval process, both at the state and federal level, will be extensive. And not to mention the cost of concrete and steel are going up daily. It should be on the table. It should be pursued as an option, but we need to take a hard look at all aspects of constructing 2 new units at Plant Vogtle.
John Sepulvado.
Mr. McDonald, according to your campaign filings, again, you've paid your son substantial sums of money, thousands of dollars of money if Lauren McDonald III is your son. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. He is my son, yes.
What role does he have in his campaign, and what is his profession when he's not working for your campaign?
He's a licensed funeral director in my business. And the only thing that has been paid has just been reimbursements. He is not soured. He has not been paid one dime for working on my campaign.
Are they loans, or what is his role in your campaign? Why is he being reimbursed?
That was a loan early on. $15,000 loan that was loaned to the campaign has been paid back.
Next question from Paul, please.
This is for Mr. Givens. What will be your policy in handling communications with lobbyists and lawyers whose cases are pending before the PSC?
Well, I think Mr. Powell and I discussed that earlier, the question you asked. We won't be alone. If either of us are elected, we are against ex parte communications. And the present rule isn't enough, just having one other commission member there. There needs to be more. I would not meet with just one other commission member and a lobbyist. There would need to be another party there, preferably, as public as possible.
Robin McDonald.
This is for Mr. Powell. Where, if nuclear power is on the table, and what do we do with nuclear waste?
Yeah, that's another obstacle to building new nuclear units, not only in Georgia but in other parts of the country. Until Yucca Mountain is open, and it doesn't appear likely that it'll be open anytime soon, Yucca Mountain, which happens to be owned by the U.S. Department of Energy, the different nuclear facilities will keep storing that spent nuclear fuel on site. That in itself could be a prohibitive measure to keep plants from being built because of the problems with on-site storage.
Yucca Mountain, excuse me for interrupting, Yucca Mountain in Nevada.
That's correct. That's correct. And not to mention the fact that this spent nuclear fuel would have to be transported from, in the case of Georgia, from Plant Vogtle all the way to Nevada, and there's a lot of opposition to transporting that spent nuclear fuel across through different communities and across state lines.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question from John Sepulvado before closing statements.
Finally, I would just briefly like to know what. I'll start with Mr. McDonald because we've asked you a lot of questions. What are the determining factors when considering any kind of rate increase? What are just a philosophical level? How do you judge that? Three most important issues when you're judging a rate increase.
The Public Service Commission has a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to the company that it regulates. It needs to be healthy. It needs to be frugal in its management operations. Then it also has to manage the wallet of the consumer, which we are all consumers. And so we have to bring that balance whereby that down the road we will have reliability, we will have the opportunity to spend on infrastructure to decrease emissions that in our coal-fired system. These are responsible decisions that the commission has to make.
All right, and may I take the liberty, John, to step in here and say 15 seconds for Mr. Powell and Mr. Givens to wrap this up. Mr. Givens.
You make sure you review the budget of the utility company, make sure they are being frugal and responsible, and you have a set rate that they are allowed to profit. That's the short answer.
And we appreciate the short answer. Mr. Powell.
Georgia Power is a great company. They're a great corporate citizen. I think it's fine for the utility company to earn a profit for their shareholders, but they shouldn't earn an exorbitant profit at the expense of the ratepayers. I think there needs to be more balance on the commission in light of the consumers and more attention paid to the consumers. Profit's okay, not an exorbitant profit.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Time for questioning has expired. Time now to move into the closing statement phase of this debate in the race for Public Service Commission District 4. Each candidate has 30 seconds. The order of the closing statements was randomly determined before this broadcast. The first statement will come from Lauren McDonald.
Well, I thank you, and I thank the Atlanta Press Corps for offering us this opportunity. A couple of things I want to make very clear. I'm very pro-nuclear. I am for all types of alternative fuels. I am not for mandates. I am not for subsidies. So there's a very distinct difference in the platforms of these candidates. I ask the people of Georgia to look at my experience, look at my record, and I appreciate very much their vote on November the 4th. Thank you very much.
Next closing statement now from Brandon Givens.
Thank you. I can make this election simple. If you like the system as it is and you want to vote for an honest man who will represent your interest, vote for Jim Powell. If you want to send a message that you'd like to see less government in your life and free market solutions, a system where you don't have to rely on politicians to be honest, then vote for me. I'd also like to say that the PSC 1 race is very important, and I'd like you to consider voting for John Mons, the Libertarian candidate.
Thank you very much. And the final closing statement now from Jim Powell.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and the Georgia Public Broadcasting for hosting these debates. Folks don't realize that many commissioners are career politicians and often come from the ranks of the General Assembly and from county commissions. Most don't have relevant energy experience, and most must learn on the job. I come from the U.S. Department of Energy, where I have 20 years of energy program, energy policy experience at the regional and national level. I will be a consumer advocate. I'm pleased to announce that I've been endorsed by Angela Spear, the incumbent Republican commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That does conclude our debate. Our thanks to the candidates, our thanks to the panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging tonight's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, you may visit the debates on the website. Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archiving these on Press Club's website. And I'm John Pruitt. Thanks so much for joining us for the 2008 election debate. Thanks for being with us.
This program was funded in part by a grant from the late Tom Watson Brown and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.